This is Radio Health Journal. I'm Reed Pence. This week, living with COVID forever.
It would be a stretch to believe that we will ever live in a world without COVID again.
A world where COVID is always present when Radio Health Journal returns.
I'm Nancy Benson, host of Radio Health Journal. If you enjoy listening to Radio Health Journal, you'll also like our sister show, Viewpoints, which covers a wide array of topics from education to history to the environment. Here's a preview of what they're covering this week on Viewpoints.
She's willing to take the risk and put herself out there and get more likes and get more followers.
The evolution of influencer marketing. Then,
many people had never seen destruction or devastation on this scale.
It's been 150 years since the Great Chicago Fire. We'll take a look back at the fire that forever changed Chicago. I'm Marty Peterson.
And I'm Gary Price. These stories in depth this week on your public affairs magazine, Viewpoints.
Listen to Viewpoints on your favorite radio station and subscribe and listen to shows anytime on Apple Podcasts and Google Play.
For the last year and a half, COVID-19 has dominated the world's attention, even as we've endured hurricanes, wildfires, floods, droughts, and heat waves, an election, an insurrection, and all manner of unrest. The one constant has been COVID. Despite masking up, keeping our distance, and developing a vaccine in record time, COVID hasn't gone away, as many of us assumed it eventually would. And many experts are now saying it never will, ever.
I think we need to be prepared for COVID not to end.
That's Dr. Ian Gonsenhauser, Chief Quality and Patient Safety Officer at the Ohio State Wexner Medical Center.
It's going to end in the sense of global pandemic and novel pathogen that has not been addressed previously, that had not previously had ability to test for, to survey, to treat, certainly to prevent. It's going to move from that novel pathogen to something that we're familiar with and that we know how to manage. But I think given the rate of variants arriving, the rate of additional peaks and surges, not just nationally, but globally, it would be a stretch to believe that we will ever live in a world without COVID again.
In many parts of the country, cases and hospitalizations have not only plateaued, but have started a decline. Deaths haven't yet, but of course that happens a bit later, so we can anticipate that deaths will also decline.
Dr. William Schaffner is professor of preventive medicine and infectious diseases at Vanderbilt University.
The hope is that at least in the better vaccinated states, that decline will continue, and as more and more people, and we hope children, soon will be vaccinated, that can keep the COVID virus's transmission pretty low so that the pandemic aspect of this virus will finally be brought to some sort of a close. But the virus is not going to disappear. It will smolder along, and we'll have to cope with it the way we cope with influenza each year.
One possibility is this could become much like the other coronaviruses that we know and that we're familiar with that simply cause common colds. This could become just an additional driver of common colds or colds that are a bit more significant, or even essentially a second significant flu that every year, if there's seasonality that develops, we may be thinking about this as a seasonal illness, or this may be a flu that we care about and that we're concerned about all year round.
But what does that mean? What does the future in COVID world look like? Certainly, if COVID isn't leaving, then the measures to combat it aren't either, at least not completely. Where vaccination rates are good, public health interventions may move to standby status. But don't throw away your face masks.
We can start to have some interventions at our fingertips that we're not using all the time, but that we do deploy when we identify that the risk of a COVID outbreak has increased. And that may mean temporary masking requests by communities or municipalities. It may mean vaccination identification requirements for businesses at their discretion. Things like that, I think we should expect to look a little bit different. And there are going to be many people that come back to their mask use and their physical distancing and their tightening of their social circles because of their own sense of self-preservation. So I think those things will take a while to wash out and really kind of transform into the long-term management strategy. But I do expect that some of those things that we've experienced throughout the pandemic are going to be with us for a long time, if not forever.
If we're vaccinating children at progressively lower age, about 4 million children are born into the United States each year. So as they mature, become older, and then become by age eligible for vaccination, we'll have to keep vaccinating them. That's number one. Number two, we may have a booster schedule for vaccines somewhat the same or similar, at least, to what we do with influenza, so that those of us who've been vaccinated may have to remind our immune systems with a booster shot to keep our protection up. So we'll have to boost. And then the third element is we'll have to keep surveillance globally about new variants. Because if new variants crop up that can evade the protection of our vaccines, well, then we'll have to develop a new vaccine and kind of start all over.
Most of that doesn't sound too bad, but it applies only in places where vaccination rates are good. There, the pandemic will likely slow down, and COVID will become what's called an endemic disease, a constant presence, but at lower levels. Where immunization rates are poor, Gonsenhauser says the pandemic will continue. Who knows how long, and COVID transmission will still make lots of people sick.
What we're dealing with at this point in time is a pandemic of the unvaccinated. This is a disease of people's decisions, not a disease any longer that's driven simply by the pathogen. We know that we have mitigation strategies. We know that we have prevention strategies like vaccines. We know we have treatment strategies that are highly, highly successful, extremely efficacious, with very few safety concerns. So what we're dealing with right now is the pandemic of choice. And so those issues for the non-vaccinated, unvaccinated population, they will continue to be very, very real. They will continue to have physical, health, emotional, and financial consequences for communities that haven't adopted vaccination. And those who have are going to have a very different experience and will learn to live with the threat of COVID as almost a non-threat.
Could we have ended COVID with more vaccination? Maybe not, but Gonsenhauser says back in the spring things looked promising. Now we'll never know.
We got down to levels that were so low in the community that if we had had a more protective percentage of individuals who had been vaccinated, there is a good chance that the surge we're experiencing now could have been much smaller, could have created less of an opportunity for variants to spread and new variants to arrive. So there certainly is benefit and mitigation to how extensive the issue is through increased vaccination. Now, would it have led to it disappearing altogether? No, likely not. But we could certainly be dealing with a much less significant problem than we are right now.
And Schaffner says we also might not be looking at a world where the virus is so widespread that virtually everyone, regardless of their vaccination status, could be infected someday.
I think that that's actually pretty likely, or if not everyone, a large proportion of the population. And those asymptomatic or mildly symptomatic real infections will give a boost to our immune system and act as though it were a vaccine, which will add to our protection. Now, all of this assumes that we don't have a new variant that can evade the protection of our vaccines.
However, Gonsenhauser says natural immunity goes only so far. It's helpful, but a vaccine is far better.
You are 2.5 times more likely to get COVID following natural immunity, following your infection, than you are if you've been vaccinated, 2.5 times. So it's true, natural immunity does provide you significant protection over no immunity, but it's significantly less protective than vaccination. And so that's why the CDC, the FDA, all major health organizations, any physician who's knowledgeable, any nurse or APP who's knowledgeable about this space will recommend that even if you have had and recovered from COVID and you have natural immunity, that you go out and get your vaccine as soon as possible. You are more than doubling your protection when you do that.
It's true that some of those who are vaccinated may feel sick with what we now call a breakthrough infection, but few of those are serious. Many will never know they're infected at all because the vast majority of the time the vaccine does its job.
Our interventions at this point, vaccination most notably, that's intended not to prevent you from ever getting COVID. It's to prevent you from having a serious infection that is dangerous to you, that puts your life or your safety at risk, that puts our hospital resources at risk. And so the intent at this point and the outcome of the vaccines, which they've been incredibly successful at, is to prevent serious illness so that when everybody eventually has their COVID experience, which I agree they will, most people will be unaware that that has happened. With the vaccine, for many of those individuals, they won't even know until they've potentially been tested to find out that they were exposed or that they did have COVID at some point.
So is American society willing to accept COVID as an endemic disease? We already have, according to Gonsenhauser. Schaffner says he watches football games on TV and sees fans sitting shoulder to shoulder, screaming for their teams without a mask in sight. A lot of us would like nothing better than for COVID to be only a slight inconvenience.
We are COVID pandemic weary. We would like to return as much as possible to a semblance of the old normal. And some people are returning willy-nilly, a bit carelessly. Other people are continuing to be careful. And I think we'll see some of that in the future. When influenza is noted, I think there will be some older people and people with underlying illnesses who will stay at home more and not go to that restaurant, and as they go out, wear a mask. Masks are not quirky anymore in the United States. We've all gotten used to them.
That's one thing about the pandemic dragging on for as long as it has. We're much more used to living with it than we used to be. It's a little like the flu. It kills tens of thousands of people every year, too, but we live with it.
Familiarity, if it doesn't breed contempt, at least breeds a certain acceptance or nonchalance, because we have in the past accepted a huge impact of influenza on our population. Now, here's a difference. The major reason people tell us that they're not so enthusiastic about flu vaccine is that it's a good but not great vaccine. It has substantial limitations, and we all acknowledge that. However, the COVID vaccine is vastly better. And so I think we have a much stronger argument, an ability to be more strongly and insistently persuasive that the vaccines we have against COVID are distinctly superior in their protection than our currently best influenza vaccines.
So where does this leave us? Gonsenhauser says it all depends on where you live and what steps you've taken to prepare for a future with COVID in it.
This is not a future of COVID everywhere all the time. This is the future of COVID always being a possibility, it always being something that's lingering out there, but vaccinated communities knowing that they are, by and large, very, very effectively protected from the virus, and unvaccinated communities will continue to drive the numbers as they are right now.
You can find out more about this issue and all of our guests on our website, radiohealthjournal.org. I'm Reed Pence.
Flu season is here, and flu is similar enough to COVID-19 to create dangerous confusion. SARS-CoV-2 can result in more serious illness, but initial symptoms are often similar. fever and chills, a cough, runny nose, and shortness of breath. COVID-19 seems to spread more easily than flu, and people are often contagious longer. Dr. Manoj Gandhi, Senior Medical Director at Thermo Fisher Scientific, says, unfortunately, you can't tell the difference by symptoms alone.
Simultaneous testing for SARS-CoV-2 and influenza viruses is essential. Multiplex PCR technology allows for testing of multiple viruses and co-infections at the same time, which provides proper diagnosis, reduces transmission of COVID-19, monitors the spread of both COVID-19 and flu, and saves valuable testing resources.
Multi-pathogen PCR testing helps drive swift and accurate treatment decisions to help simultaneously manage flu season and the COVID-19 pandemic. Find out more at thermofisher.com/COVID-flu information. Cataracts are the #1 cause of vision loss in America and a common part of aging. Now, there is an opportunity for people with cataracts to enhance their vision thanks to innovative technologies in cataract replacement lenses. Acrosoft IQ Vivity is a first-of-its-kind lens, delivering high-quality 20/20 distance vision, excellent intermediate, and functional near vision. People who chose Vivity reported improved vision at various distances for activities such as watching their grandchildren play, working on a computer, and reading. 90% of patients with Vivity stated they are satisfied with their results and would get it again. To learn more about Vivity, visit mycataracts.com. Acrosoft IQ Vivity Extended Vision family of IOLs. Important product information. Description. The Acrosoft IQ Vivity Extended Vision IOL is a type of IOL used to focus images clearly onto the back of your eye or retina to allow clear vision after the cataract removal, providing clear distance vision, better intermediate, and some near vision compared to what a monofocal IOL would provide. There is a chance you may still need glasses for distance, intermediate, and/or near vision. Side effects include visual disturbances such as glare, rings around lights, starbursts, and a decrease in ability to distinguish objects from their background, especially in dim lighting. These side effects may make it more difficult to see in some situations. Contrast sensitivity, an important measure of visual function, is the ability to distinguish objects from their background, especially in dim lighting. In the Acrosoft IQ Vivity IOL clinical study, contrast sensitivity in dim lighting was reduced in patients who received the Acrosoft IQ Vivity IOL compared to those who received the monofocal IOL. Attention! As with any surgery, there are risks involved. Prior to surgery, ask your eye doctor to provide you with the patient information brochure for the proposed Acrosoft IQ Vivity Extended Vision IOL to be implanted. This document will further inform you of the risks and benefits associated with this IOL. Discuss any questions about possible risks and benefits with your eye doctor, as well as your medical condition and any eye disease you may have. For more information, visit mycataracts.com.
And that's Radio Health Journal for this week. Radio Health Journal is a production of MediaTrax Communications. Follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram to learn more. And check Apple Podcasts, Google Play, and Spotify for a library of past programs. Plus, you'll always find previous segments and information about our guests at radiohealthjournal.org. Join us again next week for another edition of Radio Health Journal.
Coming up next week on Radio Health Journal.
I think we should all start working under an assumption that our privacy is gone.
Facial recognition, the final straw that means social media companies know virtually everything about you.
Then the inside story of wildlife crime prevention.
We have animals committing manslaughter, home invasion, breaking and entering, trespassing, jaywalking, vandalism. They're just animals being animals.
All that and more on Radio Health Journal.